Welcome to another tutorial video, and yes, you're reading the title correctly. We are once again going to be talking about SpaceX here. Like any toxic or abusive relationship, I tried to leave, but I kept getting pulled back in. Although to be fair, I'm mostly going to be talking about Google here and referencing SpaceX more as an example of something that they're doing that a lot of big tech companies are doing that are distorting their earnings, their net income or after-tax profits. So when Google, or Alphabet, as it now likes to be known by, recently reported its Q2 earnings, its net income grew nearly 300% from Q1 of 2025 through Q1 of 2026. I'll pull up their 10Q so I can show you right now. You can see it right here. The net income goes from about 28 billion to 112 billion. So initially this seems quite amazing, but when you start digging into the details, it becomes a whole lot less impressive. Specifically, when you dig in, you'll see that the vast majority of this actually comes from the other income line on the income statement. And there are about 99 billion of mostly unrealized gains on equity securities that contribute. And of course, just coincidentally, Google happens to have a $94 billion stake in SpaceX, or at least it was worth $94 billion at around the time of the IPO, which they also disclosed in their 10Q. So again, if you go in and take a look at this, you can see the other income line right here, how it goes from about 2 or 3 billion to almost 98 billion. And if you just do a quick search for the numbers, we can find a breakout of exactly what contributes. And if you look at this, you'll see that gains and losses on equity securities contribute 99 billion to this number. So they more than offset the other numbers here. They remove the impact of the negatives, and overall, it's pretty much responsible for this entire line. This happens because there was an accounting rule change about 10 years ago called ASU 2016-01 in the US that required companies to report all unrealized gains and losses on small equity stakes, so small investments in other companies, whether private or public. They have to report that on their income statement now, and so it contributes to the net income, and in my opinion, it greatly distorts the net income, the EPS, and related metrics and multiples like the PE multiple for the big tech firms. Not only does this practice make net income and the PE multiple highly questionable, but it also raises some questions about the entire market's current valuation, because a lot of people will look at the multiples that these big tech companies are trading at and say that they seem pretty reasonable given their size and growth rates, but what they're overlooking is the fact that net income in many cases is greatly overstated because of these unrealized gains. In my view, the rules really need to be updated or enhanced to respond to the current hype cycle and some of the issues that we're now seeing. Just to show you a quick example of this, if you look at Google's numbers, the LTM net income for Google, as I record this, is about 244 billion. But if you adjust for this and you take out the gains and losses, it falls to more like 123 billion. And what that means is that the PE multiple goes from a pretty reasonable 16 times to 32 times. So the PE multiple roughly doubles once you adjust for this and you remove these gains and losses, which are mostly unrealized gains and losses and are certainly one-time events in the case of SpaceX. So if you want this tutorial in writing and the screenshots, the PDFs, and the Excel model, you can go to this URL on screen. It's on our accounting page on our knowledge base, and you can go to Trading Securities there to get it. I will also pin this below the video as the first comment there. So I'm going to start with the short answer, and then we'll go into some more detailed accounting treatment and some recommendations on what to do to deal with this issue. The first thing I want to point out is that it's actually a little bit unclear to even realize in Google's filings that these are mostly unrealized gains, because, for example, we can go down to Note 7 on page 29, and we can see the breakout here for the gains and losses. We can look at the statements and get a sense that based on the cash flow statement and the fact that they're not really showing much in the way of sales and maturities relative to the gains and losses. They have 66 or 67 billion, but they have around 135 billion in gains and losses they're adjusting for. We can get a sense that they're mostly unrealized, but really, you actually have to do a search for SpaceX or unrealized to actually find the full disclosures about how much they own of SpaceX. And then if you keep scrolling down, they admit somewhere down here that the gains and losses are primarily related to unrealized gains in our equity securities portfolio from SpaceX and a private company. Of course, this works both ways, because just as there was an unrealized gain in Q2, there is almost certainly going to be a huge unrealized loss in Q3 because the company's share price has fallen so much following its IPO, and the securities on the balance sheet are marked to market. This creates a distortion in the company's net income, but you can definitely adjust for it. So let's go back to Excel and see how you might create a pro forma version of the pre-tax income and net income for Google. Okay, so here we are back in the Excel file, and essentially what I'm doing here is starting with operating income, and then I'm accounting for the typical line items that go into the other income or expense section. So interest income, interest expense, these are both recurring items, mostly cash, so they're fine to include. We can even have FX gains and losses and some other small adjustments because these are so small, especially relative to the operating income. But I specifically left out the gains and losses. And again, if you go back to page 29 of the filing here, you will see this full breakout. And so I'm essentially taking this section but leaving out these gains and losses to create a pro forma version of the pre-tax income. If we now add up all these, and then to calculate the pro forma taxes, we take each number and then we multiply by the tax rate. I can put a negative sign in front. We get our pro forma taxes, and then for the pro forma net income, we take the pro forma pre-tax income and we deduct the taxes and then the preferred dividends. And to get the LTM version, we take the full year for 2025, add the first 6 months of 2026, and subtract those same first 6 months of 2025. And then we can calculate the LTM PE multiples. So we take the equity value and divide by the reported net income, and then we take the equity value and divide by the pro forma net income. So this is a very simple way that you can adjust for these types of issues when you're analyzing these companies. Now, normally when you create a pro forma version of an item, the company's net income increases. Companies like to use pro forma versions because they almost always seem more positive, but in this case, it actually becomes quite a bit more negative and its PE multiple increases significantly. So it's sort of the opposite of what you normally expect. You could certainly still argue that 32 times is cheap for a company the size of Google with as much growth as it has, but it's still quite a bit different from 16x. 16x is kind of a normal multiple that you often see for the S&P 500 and these types of larger companies. 32 times, though, is very expensive, whether you look at it historically or for other large cap companies like this or any other metric or benchmark you want to use. You can certainly get around this issue by focusing on metrics like EBITDA or unlevered free cash flow, or even just normal free cash flow that remove or reverse gains and losses. But we think there are some other issues here, especially when it comes to indexing and ETFs and how other people view the market and these companies. In the next part of this tutorial, I'm going to start by going through some security types and accounting for gains and losses in more detail. And then I will describe some of these business models, distortions, what's going on, and some recommendations that we might make for updating these rules. As some background information, there are several different types of investments according to accounting rules, and the names and rules are a bit different under IFRS versus US GAAP. I'm focusing on the US version here just to save some time, but you essentially have trading securities, available for sale securities, and then held to maturity securities. Under US GAAP, under the current rules, the last two categories can really only be used for bonds anymore. So if you're talking about small stakes in companies' stock, whether they're public or private, it pretty much defaults to using the trading or fair value through profit and loss treatment. This is important because even if the company plans to hold the other investment for the long term, it still has to record realized and unrealized gains and losses on it as if it were just trading the security in the very, very short term. Now, with all these security types, the realized gains and losses always appear on the income statement, get reversed on the cash flow statement, and then you show the total proceeds further down on the cash flow statement. Really, the main differences come up with the treatment of unrealized gains and losses and how they're shown for trading securities. They're not shown on the income statement for AFS securities, and they're not shown at all for HTM or held to maturity securities. So I have a summary of the accounting rules here for unrealized gains and losses, but let's just go into Excel and go back to our familiar interview question accounting model here and see how it works. I'm going to assume that the specific company we're looking at has trading securities of 100. So maybe this is Google with SpaceX, and you can think of this in billions. Maybe this is close to the 94 billion that Google holds in SpaceX stock right now. Let's say that they record an unrealized gain of 20 on this. This would show up on the income statement. It would increase pre-tax income by 20, and at a 25% tax rate, net income would go up by 15. Now on the cash flow statement, net income is up by 15, but you have to reverse this unrealized gain because it was non-cash. They haven't sold anything, so by definition, it's non-cash. There will also be a deferred tax impact because on the income statement, we said that their tax bill was 5 higher, but actually nothing is due in cash if they haven't sold the security yet. So the bottom line is that at the bottom of the cash flow statement, cash stays the same. Now, on the balance sheet, cash is the same. The trading securities are up by 20. The deferred tax asset is down by 5. And so the asset side is up by 15. And then if you go further down to the other side in the balance sheet, the common shareholders' equity is up by 15 because net income increased by 15. So both sides are up by 15 and the balance sheet balances. Now, by contrast, if you had a realized gain here, so let's say that we sell all these securities and we sell them for 120 versus the current value of 100 on the balance sheet. We say that sell trading securities increases by 100, we dispose of all of them and we sell them for 120 rather than 100. The income statement looks the same. Pre-tax income is still up by 20, net income is up by 15 at a 25% tax rate. On the cash flow statement, net income is up by 15. We still reverse the gain or loss because it's still non-cash because it relates to something from a prior period in this case. We record the total proceeds of 120 down here. And so as a direct result, cash at the bottom is up by 115 because we sold the securities for 100. We got a gain of 20 and then we paid taxes of 5 on that. So the total increase here is 115. On the balance sheet, cash is up by 115. The securities are down by 100. And so the asset side is up by 15. On the other side, our net income increased by 15, and so common shareholders' equity is up by that same 15. Both sides are up by 15, and the balance sheet balances. So you can see how, at first glance, the treatment for realized and unrealized gains is actually quite similar, and really the main difference is just that with unrealized gains, the securities stay on the balance sheet and the deferred tax asset changes in some way. With realized gains, the deferred tax asset stays the same, trading securities go down, and then the cash also increases to reflect the proceeds from the sale. So I said previously that you can use other metrics like EBITDA and unlevered free cash flow to avoid these issues with net income, EPS, and PE. So you might be wondering what the big deal is. The problem is that a lot of stock indices and ETFs and funds and managers and general investors still use metrics like net income, EPS, and PE to make investment and allocation decisions. These accounting rules let companies keep inflating their net income because they can keep investing in AI startups or other companies, then have the startups buy services from them. They can also buy services from the startup so the revenue flows both ways, and then they can record both the revenue and the unrealized gains on these companies. So I'm going to go to my favorite diagram now with Thanos, and I'm adding Dr. Doom to it because Avengers Doomsday is coming out at the end of this year. The way it normally works is this. Let's say that Google invests in SpaceX and then later decides to rent GPUs from them, which actually happened in real life at around the time of the IPO. Well, SpaceX now has both an investment from Google and pretty substantial revenue from it. So SpaceX can now say that it's more valuable because Google is paying it. Also, Google invested in it, which gives it some added credibility. And Google can record a huge unrealized gain from SpaceX. It can say it's now more valuable because of its own investment and because of its commercial relationship. And so its net income for the quarter goes up because of this unrealized gain. Now, to be clear, this does not directly give Google more cash to invest in SpaceX, but it often can lead to a higher stock price. It can make it easier for Google to raise equity and debt funding, and it can make it easier to justify future investments in SpaceX and similar companies. The main issue here is not that these companies are doing anything illegal or fraudulent, but that it is a bit deceptive and that the rules were not really designed with this scenario in mind. So at the minimum, we think that companies should have to disclose realized and unrealized gains separately and have a separate category for investments in commercially related entities. If you look at the statements for Google, it's actually pretty amazing how they group together realized and unrealized gains. So at the bare minimum, these should be separate. We also think that companies like SpaceX, Anthropic, etc., where Google has a clear commercial relationship, should also be disclosed separately. These rules were created in response to the 2008 financial crisis when a lot of banks were not marking their securities and investments properly to market value, but now it's creating a bit of a different issue because we're in a different stage of the hype cycle, and I think the rules need to be updated to catch up and deal with this. Let's now do a recap and summary. So we started out in the beginning by going through the example for Google, and I showed you how to calculate its pro forma pre-tax income and net income and create an adjusted PE multiple. And it really does make a huge difference for this company. Again, you could certainly still argue that it's appropriately valued at 32 times for the PE multiple, but it's a harder argument to make than if it were really trading at just a 16 times PE multiple. Then we went through the accounting for the security types and gains and losses, realized that unrealized gains and losses look very similar on the income statement, at least for these equity securities, but you do see the differences on the other statements because of the deferred tax impact for unrealized gains and losses. With realized gains and losses, there is no deferred tax impact, but you see an actual cash impact, and of course, the security itself goes down to reflect the sale. And then we talked about the business model distortions and how many of these circular deals are creating misleading revenue and net income and valuation numbers and a lot of unrealized gains for these companies. That's about it. Hopefully now you know a little bit more about the accounting for trading securities and how it's distorting the financial results for many big tech firms.